Hello, ladies and gents. It's Justin Johnson. On my academic integrity of arts and humanities, on module D211, I want to influence youth today, young teenagers, mature teenagers, young adults, mature adults, OAPs. You want to better your circumstances. You're coming up to the end of your tether in your job. It's deteriorating your physical structure. You want to do something a bit more simpler. So why don't you get yourself into adult learning? University, better your circumstances, have a vision, set yourself some goals for the new year. Anyway, when you read, make sure you reference your reading. You can always go back to where you left off. When I say reference your reading, look at a book. Not just any book, you need to know what book it is. It's the module DD211. Understand politics, ideas and institutions in the modern world. It's block 2 of the study, so make sure, because it could be 2 of the book, 1 and 2. The book is edited by Richard Heffernan, Simon Usherwood and Edward Wastonich. It's printed at the Open University, Walton, Milton Keynes, first published 2015, second edition 2022. Because there could be several series of that one book published. Anyway, one introduction. Since 1945, Europe has been subject to the force of regionalism, which has involved a gradual interrogation among its states, culminating in the European Union that exists today. Regionalism is a process in global politics whereby states mutually agree to cooperate and work together as a regional bloc. Often coordinated trade and economic policies, the EU provides us with perhaps the preeminent example of this process in global politics. It is arguably the most advanced regional bloc in terms of institutional arrangements, policy coordination and economic power. It is arguably the most advanced regional bloc in terms of institutional arrangements, policy coordination and economic power. It is therefore an actor of global significance. While smaller in geographical terms are North and South America, Asia and Africa, the European continent would fit into the constitutional US twice. The 27 member states of the EU form the world's largest trading bloc, even after the withdrawal of the UK in 2020. In 2022, the member states had a combined population of some 450 million and counting, nearly 120 million, more than that of the US. The EU's combined gross domestic product, GDP, in 2022 was smaller than the US, but larger than China's. The Europe that has been built since the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, in 1952 symbolises cooperation of a number of European nation states prepared to work with each other in the common pursuit of prosperity and security. Encouraged by self-interest and an expanded sense of European identity. No other international organisation has anything like the range of policy responsibilities of the EU. Centred on its internal market, it provides for a supranational regulation of the production, distribution and exchange of goods, services, capital and labour, thus ensuring the free movement of each across the borders of a member state. It manages a single currency, the euro. For most of its members, coordinates extensive regional development and agricultural policies, plays a role in almost every area of public policy, including policy and justice, as well as providing a platform for concerned international action by member states on trade, international development and policy, and foreign policy. And unlike any other international organisation, this is all done by an institutional structure that allows for direct election to a European Parliament that plays an indispensable role in decision making and a legal system that can override member state laws and decisions. Page 166 of chapter 18. Thus, we are presented with a significant actor in global politics because of its cumulative weight and influence, while many other regional groupings have based themselves on the EU. No other has anything like the US institutional framework and pooling of sovereignty. This chapter will present a detailed case study of the EU. It will begin by looking at the process that have characterised its development, exploring how the EU has both widened and deepened. It then moves to explore the EU's policy competencies. Following this, the chapter looks at different ways of interpreting the EU, highlighting two approaches to aid this understanding, those of supranationalism and intra-governmentalism. This leads on to an examination of the key institutions and political actors that make up the EU. Returning to the intergovernmental versus supranational debate in light of changes following the Lisbon Treaty, before finishing on the European economy. How the EU developed from the ECSC to the EU. The process of European integration can be linked to changes that the European continent has undergone since the Second World War. Having to rebuild and start anew encouraged some states to pursue a specifically European identity, one in which Europe was a definable, specific place and a shared space that might make the horrors of a total war and a Holocaust an impossibility. As a result, European cooperation was prompted by a peace project, European security concerns, political stability, social economic reconstruction, and the political symbolism associated with a club of Western European liberal democracies. Wallace, 1996, page 19 to 20. These factors help explain why 6 European states cooperated as Europeans after the end of the Second World War, and why an increasing number of nations have continued to do so ever since. Post-war Europe was divided into East and West following the defeat of Hitler's Germany. Western Europe lay firmly within the Anglo-American sphere of influence, while the Soviet Union laid physical claim to a great swathe of Eastern and Central Europe, an area stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, symbolised by the division of Germany. This process created two spheres of influence that persisted from 1947 to 1990, providing a territorial realisation of the ideological divide of the Civil War. Western Europe states were obliged to recognise the need for diplomatic cooperation to ensure their individual and collective security. In addition, European states and the US were increasingly keen to ensure that West Germany would be bound firmly into Western Europe to protect the West from the Soviet Union threat, and to ensure that Germany itself would not repeat its past aggression. While not a direct product of the Cold War, European cooperation was certainly encouraged by it. Western European states' recognition of their common interests as liberal democracies and market economies prompted a need to promote a common association. This led to the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC. Following the signing of the Treaty of Paris by the Six Nations, Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Widening. Over time, the membership of the EU, originally known as the European Economic Community or the EEC, upon its formation in 1957, expanding from its original membership of 6 ECSC states in 1951 to 28 states in 2013, and despite the UK's withdrawal in 2020. Several states are actively engaged in negotiations to join, notably in the Balkans. Applicants for the EU membership not only to be physically located in Europe, but must be also well-established liberal democracies with stable and well-functioning market economies and a commitment to upholding the rule of law. An extensive accession process requires entrance to adapt domestic laws and institutions prior to joining so that they fit with existing European treaties laws. Known as acquis communautaire, policies and objectives, enlargement also requires the unanimous approval of existing members. The widening of the EU has been further stimulated by geopolitical changes that Europe has undergone since the Second World War, as noted above. There was a common purpose that led the initial interrogation. And while commitment to liberal democracy and free economies remains, the existential threat posed by the Soviet Union is obviously no longer relevant. Indeed, the fall of the Soviet Union was one of the most significant engines for the increase in EU members from 15 in 1995 to 28 in 2013. Page 169. The last 20 years have been the most significant increase in the number of states in the EU's history. We can highlight the following stages in EU enlargement since its inception. 1957, founders, members Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. 1973, the first enlargement, Denmark, the Republic of Ireland, and the United Kingdom. Through the latter withdrew in 2020. 1981, the second enlargement, Greece. 1986, the third enlargement, Portugal and Spain. 1995, the fourth enlargement, Austria, Finland, and Sweden. 2004, the fifth enlargement, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia. 2007, the sixth enlargement, Bulgaria and Romania. 2013, the seventh enlargement, Croatia. In the coming years, we may well see further expansion into the Balkans, with former Yugoslav states of North Macedonia and Montenegro, Serbia and Albania already candidate countries at the time of writing, 2022. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo have made official applicants to join. Iceland is also a candidate country. Although it froze its application in 2013, Turkey has been a candidate country since 1999. It initially applied for associate membership in 1959 and signed up to a customs union in 1963, which did not come into force until 1995. It applied for full membership in 1987, and negotiations have been ongoing since 2015. However, Turkey's potential membership is complicated by a number of factors. The progressive turn towards more isolationist regime under Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the most recent element, but there is also an ongoing dispute over Cyprus, where a Turkish-sponsored state has operated in the north of Ireland, 1983, without international recognition following the 1974 invasion. Unease within some member states about a state joining whose population is predominantly Muslim, which would also mean the EU stretching into the Middle East. The potential cost of incorporating the Turkish economy and its 75 million inhabitants into the EU. Norway has applied twice and has been accepted for membership in 1970 and 1992, but on each occasion it turned down membership following a national referendum. Page 170, deepening. The widening of the EU has been accompanied by the deepening, increased responsibilities granted to the EU by its member states through international treaties. This deepening has seen the EU gradually extend its policy responsibilities from cooperation in production of coal and steel to development of common monetary policy. In the form of a single currency, ever closer ties of association has prompted these shifts, and these developments have in turn led to ever closer ties of association. The deepening process is best illustrated by the following key stages in Europe's historical interrogation, where the free trade area is the starting point and economic union the potential end result. Free trade area, no physical trade restriction between members. Custom union, free trade area plus common external tariff. Single market, customs union plus free movement of goods, no non-tariff barriers or other such state-imposed restrictions. Common market, single market plus free movement of capital, labour and services. Monetary union, a common market plus a common currency. Economic union, monetary union plus a common policy. Deepening and widening illustrate a European economic and political interrogation in which ever closer union is defined as forming, coordinating, and blending national economies and politics into unified and functioning wholes. Peterson 1999, yet the substance, form, and timing of integrationist objectives within the EU are a matter of considerable debate. The building of the EU raises many pressing and urgent questions on national sovereignty and autonomy in an age of increasing national independence. The EU has developed as a regional network of nation states that has agreed a series of international treaties and to pool their sovereignty in a number of instances governing direct relations between them. What are the EU's competencies? To begin with, the range of issues for which the EU has come responsibility is quite unlike that of any such organisations, according to Hicks and Holland. The political system in the EU produces 5 types of policy output. Regulatory policies concern the workings of the single market, free movement of goods, services, capitals, and persons, and environmental and social policies. Redistributive policies involving transfers of resources from one group to another through the EU budget. Macroeconomic policies, including the role of the European Central Bank and its management of the economy, monetary union, EMU, and the common currency, the euro. Interior policies relating to civil, political, economic, and social rights of the citizens of the EU. Foreign policies to ensure the EU speaks with a single voice on world stages, including trade union and foreign aid policies. The Common Foreign and Security Policy, the CFSP, and defence cooperation. In addition, the powers that have been delegated to the EU by its member states are considerably more extensive than those found in other international organisations. The EU has its own legislative body, the European Parliament, which is on most matters has the power of decision with the governments of the member states that sit on the Council of Ministers. The permanent bureaucracy of the EU. The European Commission has significant powers of policy initiative and implementation. The Commission implements some parts of the EU law, but a large majority of implementation is done by member state governments. Most strikingly of all, the EU has its own legal order, organised around the European Court of Justice. And the corpus of the EU law, European legal order, where it has the required competency, has supremacy over the national laws of member states in cases of conflict and could be directly invoked by citizens of the member states against their own governments, if necessary. Finally, the EU has developed and is continuing to develop responsibilities in areas of public policy that have traditionally been regarded as the core of modern statehood: law, money, taxation, security, the rights of citizens, and the right to represent the population in wider international system. We have already noted that the EU legal order has supremacy over national law in some cases. In addition, the move toward greater economic and monetary union has resulted in a majority of members of the EU relinquishing their national currencies and pooling decisions making around a common currency, the euro. Collectively, the states that have adopted the euro are referred to as the euro area, although this is more commonly known as a eurozone. As of 2022, 19 of the 27 member states are using euro, with most of the remaining states nominally committed to joining. Although this remains at a political discretion, while control over direct taxation, such as income tax, is still the preserve of national governments. The EU does limited competence in direct taxation, as seen as in the harmonisation of VAT, value-added tax, system across member states. The EU has also built up powers in the field of their CFSP, as well as in defence cooperation, allowing member states to present a bigger profile of issues of common concern. EU-wide cooperation on citizen policies in the field of justice and home affairs is also developing. And on some matters, trade, for example, the EU represents the population of the EU. in a wider international community, while also party to climate change negotiation alongside member states. Page 173. How do we understand the EU? Intergovernmental versus supranational approaches. How do we understand the EU? The EU is a political system and structure of governance that spans the domestic or national level on the one side and the international and international level on the other. In doing so, it challenges us to rethink our conventional ideas about governance. As Wallace writes, the EU is an in-between phenomenon, both transformation of country politics and a new form of relations between countries. The EU challenges the idea that governance in a member state is the sole responsibility of the government of that state. Since much of what happens politically within the territories of the member states now depends on decisions taken by the EU, by the same token, the relations between the member states of the EU are no longer ungoverned, since much of the interstate interaction with one another is also structured by decisions taken at level of the EU. In addition, while it is clear that the EU has been constructed by states through a succession of international treaties, and those states retain much of the power in decision making, much of the impetus for its ongoing development has come from the essentially ungoverned process of international economy. How, then, can we characterise the governance of the EU? We can do so by illustrating two deliberately oversimplified models: intergovernmental and supranational. An intergovernmental model regards the EU as a particularly extensive as well as intensive form of intergovernmental organisation. There are a number of intergovernmental organisations in the accompanying international system, ranging from general institutions such as the United Nations, through major single-purpose but multilateral bodies in the World Trade Organization, WTO, and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, regional associations such as North America Free Trade Association, NAFTA, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN, to specialist forums such as the International Energy Agency, the International Telecommunications Satellite. These are organisations formed by states to pursue the common interests of the memberships, in which specific powers may be delegated to the organisation, but with decision marketing kept solely in the hands of representatives of the member states, while decisions might produce useful outcomes through joint institutions would not be possible for individual states to achieve by themselves. And while organisations might have some form of quasi-judicial mechanism for resolving disputes between members, the key element is the retention of decision-making between those members. In the contemporary international system, there are hundreds of intergovernmental organisations. Is the EU just one more to add to an over-expanding list? If we concede that the EU is an intergovernmental organisation, it is certainly a very special one compared to others, given the range of EU policies, the competence of powers and its institutions, and its encroachment on a core aspect of modern statehood. In essence, intergovernmental interpretation of the EU argue that despite the extensive range of policy, its competencies, and the existence of bodies such as the European Parliament and the ECG, the entire system rests on conditional acceptance of the member states. They alone hold the power to amend treaties that give any legal effect to the EU and its works, and they alone hold decision-making powers in every single area of policy. As the holders of a fundamental policy legitimacy that the EU does not possess, it is only member states that can confer authority to the European level. Thus, while some of the EU's institutions may have some supranational characteristics about which you'll find out more in a moment. An intergovernmental interpretation would claim that they are ultimately subordinate national governments, even if only in a collective sense. Intergovernmentalists reject the idea of European integration, should or ever could move towards the creation of a truly sovereign European political state of the kind that exists on the national level. Instead, the EU can only be a vehicle for national interest and political action, which in turn suggests that people's identification, albeit founded a common European citizenship as a sense of shared destiny amongst the people of the different countries that make up the EU. It will primarily remain with their country. Intergovernmentalists do not believe that European citizenship could, or even should, become deeply embedded in the imaginations of the people of Europe. And a point to paucity of evidence on the question of whether a feeling of shared political membership and identity exists above the level of nation state. In a 2018 survey, only 2% of Europeans said they felt themselves to be Europeans only, with a further 9% responding that their European identity come before their nationality. In contrast, 55% put their nationality before the Europeans, and 33% held the European identity, the European Commission, 2018. A supranational model. The second model of the governance of the EU argues that the delegational powers and the competence of the EU-wide institutions have gone so far as to have created a form of supranational governance, where decisions are made by bodies that represent collective interests rather than just those of member states. If there are decision-making mechanisms that can override the objections of one or more member states, and if the rulings of the common authority have direct effect in legal system of the members. The organisation can be said as supranational. In forming a supranational authority, states collectively use their general rights of sovereignty in the limit of future exercise of their individual rights in some areas, handing over jurisdiction in those areas to another body. Ultimate sovereignty is not a compromise, since a state can always leave an organisation and repatriate the specific competence involved, and the UK demonstrated through its withdrawal in 2022. But as long as the supranational sovereignty that is pooled and delegated for specific executive and administrative purposes as a state and its citizens could be bound by genuine and enforceable legislation made by relatively autonomous authority, it claims jurisdiction for the entire body in its designated areas of competence. Two leading theories of the EU as a form of supranational governance, Wayne Shadoltz and Alec Stone Sweet, put the argument as follows. Whereas intergovernmentalists argue that the interrogation is produced by joint decisions taken by member state governments, we claim that transnational interactions, as shaped by the EU organisations, are the crucial catalyst, whereas intergovernmentalists capitalize the Commission and ECG. I'm going to leave that there because that'll do. Page 175. That would do. That was lovely bit of reading. Thank you ever so much. How are we, Becca?